Right, good morning, Year 9, and welcome to the first part of two of the Walking Talking Mock. Now, Walking Talking Mocks are something that you will become familiar with more in Year 11, but they're a really useful way of revising. So I just want you to think about what you think a Walking Talking Mock is. And why do you think it's so helpful? What is it that you're going to get out of it? What is the point of it? So a walking talking mock is basically going to be us going through questions, past paper questions together. So we're going to walk through it, so to speak. I'm going to highlight keywords and things to think about when you do exam questions. And that means it's really useful for all of your different subjects because the command words are pretty much the same across the board. So things like explain and describe will be the same in all of the subjects. Also, it will give you an idea of how to actually answer exam questions because knowing the content is just one part of actually passing the exams. We have to make sure that we are putting the answers that the examiner is looking for. So grab your paper from yesterday. I've split this into two because normally these take quite a while. So I've split this into two. We're going to do up to question 4 today, and then we'll do 4, 5, and 6 tomorrow. There's some bigger questions in the second part, so it's only going to have 2 of the questions that we'll go through. So if you have put all your answers on a document on the computer, then just have this playing in the background, and obviously you can follow that document. That's fine. The only time you'll need to come back onto this is looking at the mark schemes tomorrow for the longer answer ones. But for today's ones, just listening to my voice as we go through it will be sufficient, so you can do that. If you have the luxury of a printer, then obviously have that in front of you and follow along as we go. Okay, so we're going to get started. Now, question number 1, it gave us 4 diagrams, and I would suggest making sure that you look at the diagrams first so you can kind of work out yourself what it is that it's showing. So we have 4 cells, cell A, B, C, and D, and we have these little dots scattered around, and they're labelled as oxygen molecules. So looking at the picture, you can see the difference between them is how many of the dots there are and where the dots are. So if we go through the question, figure 1 shows cell containing and surrounded by oxygen molecules. We've already figured that out. Oxygen can move into cells or out of cells. Into which cell, A, B, C, or D, will oxygen move the fastest? Tick 1 box. Now, the amount of times when students do mock exams and things like that, they do not read how many boxes should be ticked. And if it is a 2 box, asks you to tick 2 boxes, quite often students will only tick 1 of them. So a good technique is to look at how many marks it's worth. And it tends to be 1 mark will be 1 tick. And obviously the question says tick 1 box. So make sure that you are ticking 1 box. Now, if you get these kind of questions in exams and you haven't got the foggiest idea which one it is, leave it and come back to it after you finish the other questions. If the worst comes to the worst, tick a box that you think it most likely is going to be. Because putting something, any of the boxes will be a 1 in 4 chance, which is better than not putting anything at all. Now, it's quite a straightforward question because it's just asking which cell the oxygen will move the fastest into. So if you have a look on your papers of the 4 different cells, you can see that on cell A, you've got loads on the outside and not many on the inside. On cell B, you've got pretty much an equal amount on the outside and on the inside. And in cell C, you've got loads inside the cell and not many outside. In cell C, you've got some inside, some outside. Now already you can work out, and please feel free to annotate your papers, you will not lose marks by drawing on the papers. I would put arrows on the diagram showing which way they're going to go. So in cell A, you've got more on the outside than the inside, so they're going to move into the cell. Cell B, you've got pretty much the same concentration both, so they're going to go in and out at an equal rate. Cell C, you've got more on the inside, so the oxygen molecules are going to move outwards. And in cell D, you've pretty much got the same, so it's going to go both ways at the same rate. So the question asks, into which cell, A, B, C or D, will oxygen move the fastest? So it's going to be A, because the other ones, they're either moving out or they're going at an equal rate. So the answer to this question is A. Right, next question, 1.2. Use words from the box to complete the sentences. So it's given us 6 words to use, and we've got 2 blanks, so we need to put the correct word into the blank. So the first one says, oxygen is taken into cells by the process of, and hopefully we realise that that is going to be diffusion. So well done if you put diffusion. As you can see, this whole thing is worth 2 marks, so you will get 1 mark if you have put diffusion. The next bit, the parts of cells that use the most oxygen are. Now this one's a little bit trickier. Hopefully from the topics we've done on respiration, that uses glucose and oxygen to make energy, we know that the answer is going to be mitochondria. Now don't worry if you got one of those wrong. The worst thing that you can do in these kind of questions is read the second one, be a bit unsure about it, and leave the whole thing. You still get a mark for each one. So you get 1 mark for diffusion for the first one, and a second mark for mitochondria for the second part. 1.3. Which process produces oxygen in some cells? Tick a box. And it's worth 1 mark again. So we need to pick one of those that we think oxygen is being produced. So you can go through the list. Diffusion. Does diffusion produce oxygen? No, it's not a chemical reaction, it's just movement. Photosynthesis. What plants do? Where you have the carbon dioxide and the water going in, and you've got glucose and oxygen coming out. Protein synthesis. That is making proteins. So we're not producing oxygen, we're making proteins. And respiration, you've got glucose and oxygen going in, you've got carbon dioxide and water coming out. So the only one of those must be photosynthesis, because you're producing glucose and oxygen. Now, if you're unsure on those ones and couldn't remember the different reactions, think about what produces oxygen. What do you know produces oxygen? Plants produce oxygen. So plants photosynthesize, so it must be photosynthesis. So that's worth 1 mark. Well done if you got that one. Okay, so now we're going into a little bit of maths in this question. The first one, though, we're just stating a structure. So figure 2 shows part of the surface of a plant root. And we've got a picture of a structure that's been labelled Y and Z at 2 points, the beginning and the end of that structure. We've got X, which is just pointing to the structure. And then we've got a little ruler on there as well with graduations. Now, if you see those graduations, which are the little lines in between the 0, 10, 20, etc., we must make sure that if we're asked any questions about length, that we're being very precise and we're using those graduations. But the first question is just asking what the structure is. So 2.1, there are hundreds of structure X on each route. What is the name of structure X? And hopefully we know from our specialised cells topic that this structure is a root hair cell. Now in the mark scheme, you will get the point if you just put root hair, but it is a root hair cell. So that will be 1 mark if you named that structure correctly. Okay, I've kept the picture on this slide because we're going to have to use it. Question 2.2. The photograph shows the root magnified 100 times. The distance between Y and Z in the photograph is the length of structure X. Calculate the actual length of Y to Z. So actual length of Y to Z. Now what you have to do for this is going to be quite straightforward. How do I know it's going to be quite straightforward? Because it's worth 1 mark. So if you see a math question where it's only 1 mark or even 2 marks, don't overcomplicate it. So we need to use the ruler that they've given, and we need to measure the length from Y to Z. And we can see that that is 85 millimeters. Now, because it's been magnified 100 times, we need to find the actual size of it. So we need to take 85 millimeters and divide it by 100. So if we're dividing by 85 by 100, then use a calculator. You're allowed a calculator in all of your science exams. Please make sure you take one with you. Just pop it in and you should come out with 0.85 millimeters. So well done if you put 0.85 millimeters for that answer. Right, 2.3. Structure X is very small. There are hundreds of structures like X on a plant root. Explain how this helps the plant. Now it's worth 2 marks. Most explain questions will be worth 2 marks or more. If you have to explain something, you need to say what it does and how it does it, or why that's important in this case. So we need to get 2 points in there. Now, as I've said in previous lessons, 9 times out of 10, if you're talking about lots of structures, it's going to be to do with surface area. So if you've put anything about giving it a larger surface area or increasing the surface area, then that would be worth 1 mark. Now that will be the first part of it, because we then need to say how that helps the plant. So by having a larger surface area, it means more water, or you can say more ions, can be absorbed. So if you've put, for instance, they increase the surface area, so more water can be absorbed, that would be worth 2 marks. If you've put nutrients being absorbed, then that also will get you the mark. But you are not allowed to put food, because plants don't get their food from the roots. They make their own food, but they get nutrients or ions and obviously water through the roots. So well done if you managed to get both of those marks. If you didn't, then put your corrections on that and make a mental note about how to answer explain questions. So now we're moving on to question number 3. Figure 3 shows muscle cells from the wall of the stomach as seen through a light microscope. So we've got 4 muscle cells there in figure number 3. It's pointing to some structures which are labelled the mitochondria. We can see the nucleus and the cell membrane. 3.1. Describe the function of muscle cells in the wall of the stomach. So in this question, our command word is describe. So you just need to talk about what they do. You don't need to say how they do it, why they do it, or anything like that. You just need to describe their function. Now, it's specifically referring to the wall of the stomach, and it's going to be worth 2 marks. So if we say what the function of the muscle cells is and how that works in the stomach, that's where we're going to get our marks from. So the first point that they give you a mark for is you can either say contract or relax, either one of those. So the function of muscle cells is that they contract. That will be 1 mark. The second mark is asking you to relate that to the wall of the stomach. So why will the wall of the stomach want those contractions? You can say mix the food, you can say move the food, you can say to churn the food, you can say to mix with stomach acid or enzymes, or you can even use the word peristalsis, which is the contraction of the muscles pushing the food along. Any one of those will pick you up the second mark. So an ideal answer will be, for describe the function of muscle cells in the wall of the stomach, they contract, which mixes the food. That's it. Okay, so always have a look at the number of marks it's worth and also what the command word is to what you need to do. Okay, so we've got another maths question now, and in your biology papers that you said at GCSE, 10% of the questions will be math based. In chemistry it's 20 and in physics it's 30. Obviously you have a lot more equations and things like that to use. Now they'll never ask you any questions math based that are above foundation tier with your maths GCSE. So everyone should have the knowledge to be able to answer these from maths. The only tricky thing is that you have to apply it to a different context. So let's have a go at this question. Figure 3 is highly magnified. The scale bar in figure 3 represents 0.1 millimeter. Calculate the magnification of the cells in figure 3. Now, the tricky bit of this question is you don't even need to look or do anything with the cells. You just need that scale bar. Now, I'm going to talk through the method on this, but it depends on whether you've used this on the screen or whether you've done it, printed it out. When I printed it out, I measured the scale bar and I got it as 40 millimeters. To be more precise, 3.9 centimeters, so 39 millimeters. If you're doing it on the screen, you'll probably have a different number, and that's absolutely fine. Now, there's one equation we need to know for biology, and that's the magnification equation. To work out the magnification, it's the size of the image divided by the size of the object. So for this, we need to take our 39 or 40, whatever the length of the bar is, and we need to divide it by 0.1 because that's the size of the actual object. So if I'm using 40, for instance, as the length of that scale bar, I would do 40 divided by 0.1, which will give me 400. If you were more precise and use the 39 millimeters, then it will give you 390. If you measured the bar off the screen, so if I measure this bar now off my laptop screen, I get it as 48 millimeters. So that would be 480. So I've just taken the actual length of the bar and divided it by the scale. If you did that method, whether you got 400 or near 400, or whether you did it from the screen and got a slightly different number, if you use that method, then you've got the 2 marks. So very well done. Here's a trickier question, and it is worth 2 marks. So you do have to make sure you're thinking a little bit more than a simple division, addition, subtraction, or anything like that. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question. 3.3. The muscle cells in figure 3 contain many mitochondria. What is the function of mitochondria? And this is only worth 1 mark, so we need to very simply state the function of mitochondria. Now there's a range of options that you can put. Some people who do PE might talk about allowing to make ATP. That's fine, but we don't do about ATP really in the science specification. So I imagine most of you said to release or give energy. So anything to do with releasing energy, transferring energy, will get you the mark. You're not allowed to, however, say make energy or produce energy or create energy. And that's because we know that energy can't be created or destroyed, it can only be transferred. So we need to say transfers energy. Right, 3.4. The muscle cells also contain many ribosomes. The ribosomes cannot be seen in figure 3. What is the function of a ribosome? So again, this is worth 1 mark, and we need a simple answer for this. If you've put to make protein or synthesize proteins, then that will be your mark. That is what a ribosome does. If you said to make enzymes, you would still actually pick up the mark. That's the only option for this one. They synthesize proteins or make proteins. So that's where your mark is. 3.5. Suggest why the ribosomes cannot be seen through a light microscope. 1 mark. Now, if you see the command word suggest, it means they don't expect you to have learned the answer. You've got to think why that might be. So why do you think that you can't see the ribosomes? And it's only worth 1 mark, so it's going to be a really simple, straightforward answer. So if you've put that they're too small, fantastic. You've also got options that you can say they're not, the microscope hasn't magnified it enough. If you put that, that would be correct. If you've put the ribosomes are smaller than mitochondria, that would also get you the mark. But I imagine most people just put they're too small, and that is the expected answer for that question. Okay, so that is it for me for today. We've gone through the first half of the paper. Tomorrow we'll go through the last questions of the paper. So what I would like you to do now is make sure that you've corrected any of the wrong answers that you gave so far. From that, if you're getting any wrong, identify those areas that you didn't know about. So perhaps you didn't know, for instance, the magnification equation. So you now need to go back and revise that and add that revision to the mind map that you made. To make it a little bit easier, give yourself a running total so far in the first part of this paper. So far we've covered 15 marks worth of questions. Give yourself a mark so far out of 15. Right, join me again tomorrow and we're going to be going through the second part of this paper. Very, very well done if you got 10 or more marks really on the questions that we have done so far. But as I say, don't just leave it there. Make sure you're looking at what you didn't know and add that to your mind map. Go back and revise that section. That is the importance of these mocks. Not just finding out a mark or a grade, it's looking at what gaps you still have in your knowledge. Okay, well, have a lovely day and join me tomorrow. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.